Okay, here we go. Okay, people, we are live. Welcome back to the Paranormal Graveyard with your host, Roger Belt, and my lovely partner, Miss Christina Corsetti.
Hello, everybody.
And tonight we are talking about buried alive in all kind of different contexts, okay? Not just buried alive by accident. So we're going to roll right into this thing since we're running a little bit late. We apologize for that.
Yeah, I do apologize. That was definitely my...
Anywho, we're going to jump right in this, and Christina is going to give us our, and have I got the wrong thing? No, I did it. I'm not seeing what's going on here. Okay, anyway, lead us into this thing and let's roll.
All right, I just need a couple more minutes here. I'm not frozen, am I?
I'm hearing you.
Hear me.
It's
a little...
Okay. Can you talk to me? What's going on?
All right, can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, I hear you.
All right, my computer's just stuck at the moment. Just gonna bear with me a second. I apologize.
Okay.
All right, so are you ready to do this?
Let's do this.
All right. Guys, if my camera is a little frozen at the moment, but I'll definitely work out the kinks.
New computers, new hookups, setup, everything. There's always got to be a problem, right?
Oh, and I'm just glad I got a new laptop with. We're talking about buried alive, premature buried while still alive. Humans may be buried. The victim may act by others in the mistaken assumption that they are dead. Intentional burial may occur as a murder or execution. Also occur the victim as a part of a stunt. Intention to try. Buried alive is reported to be among the most. Now, through following asphyxiation or in cold climates, hypothermia. Trapped with fresh air to breathe, it can last a considerable time. It's been used as a very cruel method of lasting significant age of what is happening. In total darkness with very limited or no movement. And to experience great physical torment, including extreme panic. Of supposed corpses have been triggered by dropped coffins and attempted dissections. Nevertheless, patients have been documented as late as the 1890s as accident morgue box after being declared dead. So if buried alive wasn't before, it might be now.
Okay, you guys, we're going to talk about Octavia Smith Hatcher. And this is an interesting story. This took place in the 1800s in Pikeville, Kentucky, and I've actually been to Pikeville, Kentucky. Was shaken with an unknown disease, and the most tragic case of all was that of Octavia Smith Hatcher. After her infant son Jacob passed away in January of 1891, Octavia went into a bedridden depression where she gradually became very ill and slipped into a coma. On May 2nd of that same year, she was pronounced dead of unknown causes while still in her bed. Now, embalming at that time wasn't a practice, so she wasn't embalmed. She was just hastily buried. Barely a week after her burial, many of the townspeople had been stricken with the same debilitating illness and fallen into a comatose state. The difference was, after a time, the townspeople began to wake up. Octavia's husband began to fear the worst and worried that he had prematurely buried his wife while she was still breathing. He procured an exhumation of her grave, only to find that his worst fears were in fact true. The lining on the inside of the coffin had been scratched and torn to pieces. Octavia's nails were bloodied and broken, and her face was contorted with horrific fear. She had died in the ground after being buried alive. Octavia was reburied, and her husband erected a lifelike monument over her gravesite. The monument still stands today. It was later speculated that the mysterious illness had been caused by a testy fly, an African insect that can cause a disease known as sleeping sickness. Creepy stuff, you guys. I mean, back then, before the embalming and all that, if somebody was presumed dead, they just, and especially if it was like during the summer of the hot season, they wanted to hurry up and get them buried, because of, the decay factor being a lot higher. And they would hurry up to stick them in the ground, and they may not be dead. So, nowadays, of course, and we'll get into a little bit more of this later on. Bill had brought up something about the embalming, which we'll get to a little bit later. Mina El Horai, how you pronounce that? Horai? Christina, you there? Okay, what is going on here? Okay, I don't know if she's frozen or what here. Hello, Christina. Hello, hello. I heard something. Are you there? Christina. Hello. Hello. Okay, I didn't know what happened to you. You were there and then you weren't there.
I'm just having computer issues right now, so keep going, and I'll cut in after. Just keep going.
Okay. Mina El Horai. I'm going to say it Horai. It's the best way I can describe it. Okay. Unusually, when you're on a first date with someone, and this is kind of interesting, it's funny but not funny, I guess. When you're on a first date with someone, you think about how it will come to a close at the end while you're supposed to plan for the unexpected. Nobody should ever have to plan to be buried alive after dessert. One such horrific story comes from May 2014. A 25-year-old French woman named Mina El Horai had been chatting with a suitor online for months before deciding to make a trip to Morocco to meet him for a real first date. She arrived at her hotel in Fez, Morocco on May 19th for her date with her dream man, but she never checked out. Mina met the man and they shared a lovely evening until she collapsed onto the floor mid-date. Instead of calling the police or an ambulance, the man assumed Mina had died on the spot and made the hasty decision to bury her in a shallow grave in his garden. The problem was Mina wasn't actually dead. As it happens, she was an undiagnosed diabetic and was in a diabetic coma while he buried her alive. A few days passed before Mina's family filed a missing persons report and flew to Morocco to try and find her. The Moroccan police were finally able to track down her murderer. Now, I wouldn't call him a murderer. He didn't really know, I don't think, any different. And raided his home. They found his muddy clothes and a used shovel before discovering the horrific scene in his backyard. The man confessed to his crime and was charged with manslaughter. So, note to everybody out there listening and watching, you might want to be careful who you date from the internet. If you pass out or something, they might bury you in their backyard. Anyway, and I think this is pronounced Boger. Mrs. Boger. In July 1893, a farmer named Charles Boger and his wife were living in Whitehaven, Pennsylvania, when Mrs. Boger suddenly died, or they thought, of unknown causes. Doctors confirmed her death, and she was promptly buried. That should have been the end of the story, but sometime after her death, a friend told Charles that his wife had suffered from hysteria before Charles had met her, and it was possible that she hadn't actually been dead. The very thought of Mrs. Boger having been buried alive haunted Charles until he became hysterical. Unable to live with the thought of his wife dying in her casket, he employed friends to help him exhume her body for confirmation. What he found was shocking. Mrs. Boger's body was turned over, her shroud and robes were shredded to pieces, and the glass of her coffin lid was broken all over her body. Her skin was blooded and scratched, while her fingers were missing entirely. It was presumed that she chewed them off while attempting to escape. Nobody knows what happened to Charles Boger after that discovery. And I will just continue here. Hopefully, Christina will get her bugs worked out here momentarily and get back in here with us. But could you imagine, in those days, of course, like I said, embalming wasn't the thing. So people would just bury their family members in their backyard or whatever. They had their own little family cemeteries and stuff like that. If your spouse, and even the doctors had said, yeah, they're dead, wrote a death certificate, what have you, and you dug a grave, buried them in your backyard. And then you find out later, well, they may not be. And so you have them exhumed, and then you find out you buried them alive and they died because of you. Whether you knew they were still alive or not, it's beside the point. Well, no, it wouldn't be, because if you knew they were alive, you wouldn't bury them, right? But I'm just saying, if you knew that you buried them prematurely because the doctor said, yeah, they're dead, there's two people that blame here. One is the doctor, and one would be yourself. And how would you live with that? I can understand why they couldn't find him. He probably went off the deep end. I mean, it might have went and jumped off a cliff somewhere. Who knows? But anyway, are you back? Hello?
Can you hear me, Roger?
Yeah. Why are you cutting in and out of your audio?
I'm having difficult problems. Yeah, I'm having problems right now, so keep going.
Okay, well, that sounded better, actually.
I apologize for all these problems, I didn't expect this to happen.
And your audio sounds a little better right there. I don't know what you did, but anyway. Angelo Hayes Some of the most horrifying tales of premature burial are horrifying because the victim miraculously survived the ordeal. Such is the case of Angelo Hayes in 1937. Angelo was a free-spirited 19-year-old boy residing in St. Quentin de Chalice, France. One day, Angelo was riding his motorcycle around the village when he was suddenly thrown from his bike and tossed headfirst into a brick wall. Without hesitation, Angelo was declared dead by doctors and was promptly buried 3 days after his accident. In the nearby town of Bordeaux, an insurance company became suspicious after realizing that Angelo's father had recently insured his son's life for 200,000 francs, and an inspector was sent to investigate the claim. The inspector had Angelo's body exhumed just 2 days after he had been buried to confirm the cause of death, only to find a surprising answer. Angelo wasn't actually dead. When the doctor removed the death shroud, he found Angelo's body warm and his heart barely beating. He was immediately taken to a hospital where he endured several operations and extensive rehabilitation before making a full recovery. As it happens, he had only been in a state of unconsciousness due to his severe head injury. Angelo went on to invent a security coffin with all the bells and whistles to ensure survival of a premature burial. He toured with his invention and became somewhat of a celebrity in France. Now, my question here is, this was in 1937. Embalming was used in the early 1900s, wasn't it? So, why would they promptly bury him without doing embalming or any of the whole 9 yards? You know what I'm saying? That is a little suspicious. I gotta say that. Okay, Mr. Cornish. John Snart published the thesis, I can't pronounce, of horror. There's this, hey, you know what I'm talking about. In 1817, in it, he recalls a gruesome tale of premature burial involving a man named Mr. Cornish. Cornish was a beloved mayor of Bath who died of an apparent fever some 80 years or so before Snart's work was published. As was customary at the time, Cornish's body was buried fairly quickly after he was pronounced dead. The gravedigger was halfway done with his work when he stopped for a quick drink with some visitors who was passing by. While they were having a chat, they heard the sound of stifled moans coming from the general direction of Mr. Cornish's half-buried grave. It dawned on them that he had in fact been buried alive, so they hurried to try to save him before he ran out of oxygen in his casket. But by the time they had removed the dirt and were able to open the coffin lid, it was too late. Mr. Cornish had suffocated in his own grave and left his knees and elbows bloodied and beaten. This story scared Cornish's half-sister so much that she told her relatives to behead her when she was thought to be dead so that she wouldn't suffer the same fate. Oh, that's a little bit intense. But then again, I could understand, I guess, why, she wouldn't want to wake up in her coffin in the ground and suffocate to death like that. Okay, the 6-year-old who survived. The idea of being buried alive is scary enough, but it becomes inconceivably horrific when a child is the victim of such a catastrophe. In August of 2014, that is exactly what happened. And I keep coming back to this. 2014 embalming would have been in practice. exactly what happened to a 6-year-old girl in Uttar Pradesh, India. According to the girl's uncle, Alak Awas, I can't pronounce these names, a married couple that lived close to the victim told the girl that her mother wanted them to accompany her to a fair a few villages over. It wasn't until they reached an expansive sugarcane field that they proceeded to strangle the girl and bury her for an unknown reason. Luckily, some of the villagers working in the field saw them enter and became suspicious. When they exited without the child, they went to the spot and found her unconscious and not breathing in a shallow grave just inside the field. They were able to rush her to the hospital in the nick of time, and when she regained consciousness, she was able to identify her kidnappers. The girl did not remember being buried alive. That's good, I guess. Police do not know why the neighbors planned to kill the girl, and the hunt is still on for the two suspects. As horrifying as the case is, luckily it did not end with a tragic death. Now that's just, why would, number one, why would they want to kill this girl and bury her in a sugarcane field? If that was her neighbors, what were they doing with the child and not her parents? So, a lot of questions to that. Okay, buried alive voluntarily. Hey, Jen Barrett. Hey, how you doing? Okay, for as long as humans have been alive, there have been cases of those trying to defy fate. There are now tutorials on what to do if you find yourself 6 feet under with no means of escape. And people have gone so far as to be voluntarily buried alive to try and escape death. In 2011, a 35-year-old Russian man did just that, only to succumb to a tragic death. For whatever reason, the man in question believed that burying himself alive for 24 hours would make him lucky for the rest of his life. I guess not. With some help from a friend, he dug a grave outside of the city of Blagos. I can't pronounce that. Blagosnik something. And inserted a makeshift coffin complete with air piping, a single bottle of water, and a cell phone. Now, you going to get a cell signal buried in the ground? I don't know. Once the man got inside the casket, his friend covered him with nearly a foot of dirt and left. The man called his friend just once to say he was fine. But when the friend returned to relieve him in the morning, what were they going to do? Trade places? He was dead. It seems that an overnight rain might have blocked the air pipes and left the man to suffocate in his own casket. While this story is tragic, the more disturbing thing is that being buried alive was a popular internet trend in Russia at the time, so who knows how many more suffered the same horrific fate. I'm going to tell you something. Now, I've seen these Facebook posts talking about, would you sleep in a coffin overnight for $10,000 if there was air in there and it wasn't in the ground? I would consider that. Because I'm not afraid of sleeping in a coffin. But you ain't putting me in the daggum ground throwing dirt on me just so I can prove how badass I am. Just saying. Are you back?
I'm almost there, Roger.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and do this next one while we wait.
Yep.
Sipho William, Mdletsh. How would you pronounce that?
That's my problem.
Anyway, in 1993, 24-year-old South African man named Sipho Williams, we'll just call him that, and his fiancee were involved in a severe car accident. Although Sippo's fiancee survived, Sippo was so badly injured that he was declared dead by responders following the accident. Sippo's body was taken to the Johannesburg mortuary and placed in a metal box for burial, but Sippo was never actually dead. He had just become unconscious in the wake of the crash. For 2 days and nights, he remained in the box until he awoke in a confused daze and began to scream for help. Luckily, some of the workers at the morgue were around to let him out of the box, and he survived the whole ordeal. The unfortunate part of the story came when Sippo tried to return home to his fiancée, only to be sent away because she thought he was a zombie. As if being buried alive wasn't horrific enough. Now, how'd you like that? That'd be, they pronounce you dead, put you in a box, and you wake up in there screaming and hollering, beating on the lid, whatever, trying to get. And then you go back to your fiance's house just to be told that they don't want you around because you're a freaking zombie. Hey, as I told you, these stories are strange, and that's what makes them interesting. Some of them are really strange and weird. They didn't start coming. Yeah, right. Excuse me, y'all. Sorry about that. Stephen Small. In 1987, an Illinois publishing and media heir named Stephen Small was kidnapped and buried alive in a makeshift wooden box near the town of Kankakee. His assailant, a 30-year-old man named Danny Edwards, and his 26-year-old girlfriend, Nancy Risch, crafted a plan to abduct him and keep him immobile and underground while asking for $1 million ransom from his surviving family members. His kidnappers were able to provide the 39-year-old Mr. Small with minimal air, water, and light inside his homemade coffin via tubes, but he was left buried 1 meter or 3 feet under a sandy area. He ended up suffocating after his breathing tube failed. Police were only able to find Mr. Small by locating his maroon Mercedes near the burial site. Since Edwards and Risch were convicted, there has been some debate with the testimonies over whether or not the two intended for Mr. Small to die in his coffin. Either way, it was a horrific crime with tragic consequences, and Edward Risch will most likely remain behind bars for another 27 years. I don't think they should ever let him out. Just saying. Okay. This one's called The Shoemaker. In 1822, a 40-year-old German shoemaker was laid to rest, but there were questions about his death from the start. Although the shoemaker's family confirmed his passing, he looked dead, they said. Now here you go. Now, this is how you bury somebody. Well, they look dead. They may be unconscious or in a coma, what have you, but they look dead, so let's bury them. Anyway, he looked dead, they said. No one could detect any stench or rigidity in the cadaver. Still, the funeral went on as planned, but as the gravedigger was dispersing the last shovelful of dirt onto the grave, he heard a knocking from below. Reversing his process and now removing the earth as quickly as possible, the gravedigger found the shoemaker moving inside his coffin. His arms were drawn upward. He wasn't cold, and when an attending physician opened a vein, blood flowed all over the shroud. All over the course of 3 days, resuscitation attempts were made, but all efforts were fruitless. The shoemaker was declared dead once more and laid to rest for a second and final time. Now, of course, yeah, this was back before the embalming thing and all that. So, yeah, I can see that. Essie Dunbar. Yeah, it does. How about Star Bill? Anyway, Essie Dunbar. In 1915, a 30-year-old South Carolinian named Essie Dunbar suffered a fatal attack of epilepsy, or so everyone thought. After declaring her dead, doctors placed Dunbar's body in a coffin and scheduled her funeral for the next day, so that her sister, who lived out of town, would still be able to pay respects. But Dunbar's sister didn't travel fast enough. She arrived only to see the last clods of dirt thrown atop the grave. This didn't sit well with the Dunbar sister, who wanted to see Essie one last time. She ordered that the body be removed, and when the coffin lid was opened, Essie sat up and smiled at all around her. She lived for another 47 years. Now, how freaking cool is that? I love it. That is freaking awesome.
Where are we?
Huh?
Where are we?
Your audio is horrible, hon.
I know. I'm not going to use this computer next time.
Well, you're just gonna have to get it all figured out what it was causing all this, because that sounds horrible.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Okay, are you good to go?
Yeah, where are we?
Well, we're actually on died of cancer, which is supposed to be me. I'll go ahead and do this one, and then we can catch back up where we were.
Okay.
A 45-year-old woman who had died of cancer was heard screaming and banging in her grave just hours after her funeral by several people visiting the local cemetery. Panic about the shouting from 6 feet under caused a team of concerned citizens to frantically disinter the recently buried corpse, but by the time they had broken into the sealed coffin, the woman was dead. Greek media reported that the woman had suffocated to death while she was buried alive, but a doctor who was at the team insisted the woman had been dead for hours and could not have been revived. Now, I don't know about all that. I mean, if she was dead, and it doesn't give a date here of the year and stuff, so I don't know about the embalming part of all that. But anyway, Christina, if you are back with us here, tell us about the Brazilian live burial.
After she died, in the way, you know what I mean? She would have been dead anyway.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, back then is a little weird, because don't they have to embalm them for certain reasons?
Well, I think it's a natural thing now. It's well, when you get right down to it, no, people buried their loved ones, like I said earlier, in their backyard. Back in the old days, when they died, they would bury them in a grave in the backyard.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I think the whole embalming and the whole 9 yards was just a money-making scheme by the funeral companies, but oh well.
To make money, right?
They all work hand in hand, like pharmaceutical doctors, funeral directors, morticians. It's all about making the money.
Exactly. All right, Haunted Salem is back. All right, let's see. Brazilian
back.
live burial. Sorry about that, everybody. They're just having trouble today. Went to mourn her loved ones in a Brazilian graveyard had an unimaginable spooky shock when a body rose from a nearby grave. A woman was at the cemetery in Ferraz de Vancolica. What is it? Vascolis?
Vasconcelos?
When she heard faint groaning sounds and then noticed the earth shifting in a nearby grave. So she told the press, "I was terrified to see a man who I thought was dead trying to get out of the grave. He had his head and hands out, and he was moving his arms around trying to get out." The traumatized woman ran away screaming. She tried to get assistance from the local police, but she couldn't persuade them to believe her tale of the rising dead. Eventually, the cemetery office confirmed her claim, and a team was sent to rescue the man who had been buried alive. Now, while he was in the hospital recovering from his claustrophobic ordeal, the man told police he was involved in a fight in another part of the city and was badly beaten by his attackers, who must have buried him alive while he was unconscious. Disturbingly, this was the second time somebody was buried alive by their assailants in Brazil in under 3 months.
Dang. So apparently they have a lot of that stuff going on over there. The Dong baby girl?
The Dong baby girl.
Dong baby girl. Lu Exayan was a pregnant woman from the Chinese province of Dongdong. Since she lived in an agricultural community, she did not have access to modern medical care. Everyone around her believed that she was only 4 months pregnant, so when she went into labor, they expected a stillborn baby. When she gave birth, the child was unresponsive, and everyone assumed it was dead. However, I'm just going to call her X because I can't pronounce that. X's husband realized that his wife needed medical care and called for an ambulance. As she was rushed to the nearest hospital, X's mother buried the baby in their yard. When Lu X arrived at the hospital, the doctors provided all the necessary care, but they also determined she'd actually been 6 months pregnant. They also questioned the logic of burying the baby so soon without having medical professional check to see if it was possible to save the child. That's when X's husband rushed back to the burial site, dug up the baby, and found it still had vital signs. After 3 days in the hospital, the family left because they did not have enough money to pay the bills. But once the story made international headlines, donations poured in to help the little girl, and she was able to return to the hospital where she received the necessary medical treatment. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's one of the stories you get to hear, I mean, I hope you guys are enjoying this, and we're sorry about all the technical problems, but Edgar Allan Poe, right on. Anyway, okay. Tell us about Mike Meany.
Mike Meany is a little bit different from most of the other people on this list. Well, the Irish barman had himself buried alive as a stunt. I can't tell exactly what Meany was trying to prove, but he successfully stayed underground for 61 days without dying or going too insane. That's crazy. 61 days. That's what, 2 months?
How you go? No, you ain't burying me for 1 day.
How do you not go insane being buried under the ground?
For 61 days.
Yeah.
Okay, they would have had to have built him a coffin like enormous size to hold all the food and water and everything it would take to survive that long.
Actually see what happened. Meany wasn't the only one trying to perform this crazy stunt. At the same time, an American named Digger Odell was trying to capture the world's record for premature burial, but he couldn't compare to the Irishman. Now, Meany's friend buried him in a predominantly Irish district of London. There was a hole in the coffin so he would not die from carbon dioxide poisoning. He also used this hole to send him water and food. For the stunt to work, Meany had to have staggering amount of trust in his buddies. 61 days underground, Meany reemerged into the light wearing sunglasses to shield his eyes. Lived to see his stunt topped on multiple occasions, but he was the one who inspired these daredevils to break his record. However, the Guinness Book of World Records no longer acknowledges this particular stunt, since it's their policy not to promote stunts that are incredibly life-threatening.
61 days in the ground, people. 61 days. I don't give a crap if you cut a hole in there or not and pour food and water in.
I know, right?
61 days buried in the ground. No. No. Anthony Britton. While people like Meany bury themselves alive for long periods of time, they usually have helpers waiting above ground. However, some stuntmen actually try to escape from their graves unaided. These escapologists, whatever you want to call that, date back to Harry Houdini, the famous magician who performed a similar stunt. Recently, escapologist Anthony Britton attempted to one-up Houdini and almost lost his life in the process. For Britton's stunt, he was buried in a standard grave 2 meters 6 foot deep. He wore handcuffs, but instead of lying in a coffin, the man was placed straight into the ground. As you might expect, things went poorly. 9 minutes after the burial, Britton was still underground, breaking the safety threshold to set up with the emergency crew. The crew quickly dug him up, getting him out just moments before he would have died. In later interviews, Britton stated that his arm was trapped by the compression of the soil. The exertion of trying to free his arm almost caused him to pass out. Even worse, every time he tried to exhale, the soil pressed against his chest, making it impossible to breathe. Fortunately, Britton survived the ordeal, and he is still practicing. He is still a practicing escapologist. I think I'd have had to give that career up.
I would have gave it up too.
Yeah, just saying. I mean, you come that close, and I recently experienced coming close to what I feel like was death, and I wasn't buried in the ground. So no, I don't think I'd want to be buried in the ground. And I can see where when they covered him up, the weight of the dirt. Well, when he would breathe out, it would shrink his the form of his body.
Wasn't he in a coffin?
No, he was buried straight in the ground.
Oh, with no coffin? Oh, okay, that's nuts.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, his body would have been like, say, this, right? But whenever he breathed out, it would compress. And so would the earth. So that
what about all your holes? Your nose, your ears, your mouth?
Each time he breathed out, he would lose a little more expanse, and therefore his breaths would get shorter and shorter until, he couldn't get a breath anymore.
I don't know about that.
No, not me. I'm sorry. I don't need pain that bad. Just saying. Okay, tell us about the Compton baby girl.
2 women were in for a surprise while taking a walk down a Compton, California bike trail in November 2015. On their way down the path, they suddenly heard muffled baby cries coming from under the ground. A woman called for police officers, and when the authorities arrived on the scene, they found a baby girl buried under a pile of asphalt on the bike trail. Only a day or 2 old. Fortunately, the little girl, the police officers were able to quickly retrieve her and get her to a nearby hospital. Interestingly, the baby was wrapped in a hospital blanket, showing she was born in a medical facility. The detectives who took the case quickly determined the identity of the mother, and authorities posted a $500,000 warrant for her arrest. The woman was actually hauled into jail, and she is now facing charges for attempted murder and child endangerment. So far, the baby is recovering well, but if those two women haven't stumbled across the baby when they did, she would not have survived.
Wow.
Do that to somebody, you know, that's not right.
Right. But now, where is this woman if she just got out of the hospital from having a baby?
And then she buries it.
Yeah, but she's going to be going down a bike trail and she's going to bury her baby under asphalt. Where would she have gotten the asphalt? Yeah, I mean, that's just a curious part, I guess, to add to that. Tom Guerin. The Irish potato famine caused a massive amount of death. And as such, Irish grave diggers were hard-pressed to find enough space for all the corpses. They worked hard and too quickly, often making some major mistakes. A common story from that time period was the tale of Tom Guerin, a 3-year-old boy who was buried alive by mistake but managed to survive. Guerin was presumed dead and buried, but during the interment, the gravediggers accidentally broke both of his legs with a spade. Nevertheless, he was still able to dig his way to the surface. Of course, there is another version of events. Some historians believe that the gravediggers realized their mistake for accidentally breaking Tom's legs, causing the boy to moan in pain. However, Guerin himself did not support the second version of events. After the ordeal, Guerin walked with a limp, and in the 1890s, he appealed to the Board of Guardians for a new pair of boots. To convince them of his cause, Guerin wrote a verse about his burial. I rose from the dead in the year 48, when a grave at the Abbey had near been my fate. Since then, for subsistence, I have done all my best, though one shoe points eastward and the other points west.
Oh.
Interesting stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay, now we're going to talk about the Tiandong
County baby.
baby.
Well, a southern Chinese woman went out picking herbs one day in May of 2015. Cemetery, when she heard the sound of a baby's cries coming from beneath the ground, startled, she went to investigate and realized there was an infant buried alive. When the police were notified, they dug up the baby boy and transported him to the hospital for medical care. Tried to figure out what happened, they uncovered a horrible story. The boy was born with a cleft lip, and the parents did not want to raise him. The baby had a cardboard box and abandoned him in the cemetery. Later, several relatives went to the graveyard and, believing the boy to be dead, buried him in a few centimeters underground. According to the parents, they were not at fault. In a weird twist of events, they blamed the boy's grandparents for paying a hitman to take care of the baby. I was surprised that nobody believes the parents' version of events. In total, the little boy spent 8 days buried underground. When he was dug up, the police noticed that he was coughing up dirty water. The baby most likely survived because oxygen and rainwater seeped through the dirt, giving him the essentials to stay alive. Fortunately, after receiving medical care, the boy's health returned to normal.
Awesome. Yeah. And his parents ought to be buried underground.
Absolutely.
You know, let the punishment fit the crime.
Exactly.
Okay. Natalia Pasternak. Natalia Pasternak has one of the most unusual stories on this list. A native of Siberia, Pasternak often went for walks in the woods with her dog. One day she was collecting birch sap when she came upon a bear. The animal attacked her, mauling both of her legs. Pasternak tried to fend off the bear with a birch branch, but she soon lost consciousness. Believing Pasternak was dead, the bear proceeded to dig a hole. The creature then buried Pasternak, thinking her body would be available for later for food. Fortunately, hunters stumbled onto the scene and found Pasternak buried under dirt and debris. Realizing the bear was probably still around, the hunters found it and shot it. When they finally unearthed Pasternak, her first question for the hunters was to make sure they killed that bear. Yeah, Pasternak is making full recovery from the ordeal, saying that the incident gave her a new lease on life. She attributes, and I can relate with that one, the attributes her survival to a prayer she said during the attack, and she's thankful that the hunters rescued her before the bear returned for its meal.
That's just nature, you know. It's life.
You know, first
You know,
thing when I raise up, somebody shoot
just
that damn bear.
burying. Can you imagine?
Right. Okay. Brazilian man crawls out of his own grave. That's interesting.
A woman visiting a family tomb in Brazil thought she was witnessing Patient Zero in a real-life version of Night of the Living Dead when she witnessed a body emerging from a grave waving its arms. Convincing the authorities to come to the cemetery to either rescue the man or start making headshots, police rescued the man, who they believed to be a former city worker, fight in another part of the city. Badly beaten by attackers until he passed out and was taken to the cemetery to be buried. So,
okay, they took him to the cemetery to be buried alive.
and you know, you're walking in the cemetery, and here you are at Night of the Living Dead. You know, trying to get out.
Yeah, yeah. Brains, more brains. Okay. How come I get all the weird names?
Sydney Roger.
Naysai Perez.
There you go.
And well, we're going to call him Nay, okay? In 2015, a 16-year-old Honduran girl named Nay Perez was mistakenly buried alive. Her family reportedly heard screaming coming from inside her coffin, though when they opened it, she was dead. According to relatives, her body was still warm and she had bruises on her fingertips as well. The glass viewing pane on her coffin had been smashed. Doctors believe she had suffered a severe panic attack, which temporarily stopped her heart, resulting in the initial pronouncement of her death. You know, it's sad in the cases where, and of course, this, I don't even think it gave a date for that. Yeah, it did, 2015. Okay, now does that mean that in Honduras they don't embalm them?
Obviously. And you notice how it's always with far away countries like this that have these problems, because it happens more than people realize.
For all you guys in the chat and ladies over there, help me out here. You know, we have these cases with dates like 2013, 2014, 2015, even 1993, where these people are buried. Well, and in the cases where they never made it to a morgue to be, or a funeral home to be embalmed, I can understand. But when you have cases like this where people are mistakenly buried alive, it says here, family reported hearing screaming coming from inside her coffin. Okay, if they were going to go to all the trouble to, at this year, bury a person in a coffin, regular funeral, blah, 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 wouldn't they not have embalmed this person and did all the normal stuff that they would do? Unless, like I said, they just don't do that. Unless they don't do that over there in Honduras and these other places. Surely they do in China.
Yeah, well,
I mean, I can't help but wonder this, because as Bill had brought up way back earlier, you ain't going to wake up after you've been embalmed.
Oh no.
You
back in the 1800s, the way they used to do it is they used to scream in your ear, and if you didn't wake up from that, you were considered dead.
Once you're buried, you're embalmed, you're done. My opinion.
But it seems like none of the embalming is happening.
Exactly. In these foreign countries like this, they must not embalm people.
Exactly.
Anyway, Shakarai.
What do we got here?
Shakarai
Kali Lai.
Kali?
Shakarai Kali 91. Shakarai Kali. The wealthy daughter of one of the India's more prominent families went missing. In 1994, her skeletal remains were discovered by police in the courtyard of her own home. Awful turn of events, her second husband had drugged her in her sleep, a mattress in like a coffin-like box, and covered it with another mattress. Conscious, confined to a constricted space, and buried by the man whom she trusted. Her skeletal remains were recovered and the mattress was removed. One of her hands was found clutching the mattress which lay below her. The side of the box was scratched with her nails, perhaps in an attempt to get out, probably suffocating in the last pangs of breath.
That's another thing. Beware who you marry.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're royalty or anything like that, people are out for your power and your money. So if you suddenly disappear, don't say they warn you. They got what they wanted. They didn't need you anymore. Damn. Okay. Man buries himself for good luck. Dies on accident. Now, I'm not going to bury myself for good luck. I'm sorry, people. That ain't happening. Around 2010, and here we go with the date again, 2010. Mark the date, 2010. An odd internet craze began in Russia that found bloggers burying themselves alive. Okay, here you go. They buried themselves alive, so they wouldn't have been embalmed. Okay, so that takes care of that. Okay, some people thought it would bring them luck. Others just hoped they would get likes. Now, I have to say this because Facebook is like that. People will post anything just to get Facebook likes and comments. I think I've ranted about that a few times. Good grief, what would you do if you need attention that bad? Get a dog. Just saying. The man in this story believed that burying himself alive for 24 hours would make him lucky for the rest of his life. With some help from a friend, he dug a grave outside the city of Blazvichnik, inserted a makeshift coffin complete with air piping and a single bottle of water and a cell phone. Yeah, we did this one. The man called to say he was fine, and then he wasn't because he died. But this is what I'm saying. People will do really ignorant stuff just to get likes on Facebook. Why? What is it worth?
Nothing. Not your life.
I mean, I'm not going to put myself at bodily risk just so somebody will click the like box on my Facebook page. Anyway, okay. The girl that lived.
All right, well, according to her uncle, in August of 2014, an Indian girl was told by a married couple that lived close to the family that her mother wanted them to accompany her to a fair over. It wasn't until they reached an expensive sugarcane field that they proceeded to strangle the girl and bury her for unknown reasons.
Okay, yeah, that's when we're...
What?
That's when we already...
Well, luckily, he did. Apologize for it.
You hear me?
Yes, I do.
Hello? Okay, that's one we've already done.
Okay. Then what about Lawrence Cawthorn?
Now that one I don't think we've done.
Go for it.
Okay, one fearful story of premature burial comes from a pamphlet entitled The Most Lamentable and Deplorable Accident. A London butcher named Lawrence Cawthorn fell fatally ill in 1661, and his landlady was eager for his swift death so that she could inherit his belongings. That figured, don't it? So far, so good. She saw to it that he was quickly pronounced dead without a doctor's consultation and buried at a nearby chapel. Not long after his interment, visitors and mourners had heard screams and shrieks coming from the grave. When they dug him up, Cawthorn's shroud was completely shredded, his eyes were swollen, excuse me, and his head was blooded beyond recognition from where he'd beaten it against the coffin. This is it. You can't trust people, not your landlady, your landlord. Everybody just wants you gone so they can get your stuff. We don't care if you really dead, as long as you look dead, like that one. Well, they look dead, you know. Ay, 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 ay.
Exactly.
Anna Hockwalt.
Anna Hockwalt. All right. On January 10th, 1884, Anna Hockwalt of Dayton, Ohio, to the kitchen after dressing on the day of her brother's wedding and was found dead shortly afterwards. Chair with her head leaning against the wall. The wedding went on, and her death was determined to be the result of a heart palpitation combined with her naturally nervous. Anna was buried in Woodland, but her friends, smart people, feared that she'd be buried alive because her ears bore a remarkable natural color. They shared their suspicions with Anna's parents, who finally had her disinterred. When her coffin was opened, she was on her right side, her fingers chewed to the bone, and her hair was pulled from her head.
Wow. That'd be a horrible way to wake up,
Absolutely.
And you can't tell me that if you woke up, of course, it's going to be dark as I don't know what, right? But you feel it,
Panic.
you know damn well you're in a coffin. And you figure if you're in a coffin, you're probably in the ground. Especially
So
when
I thought it was
open and can't.
I thought it was a good idea after hearing all these stories to tell everyone, the listeners, how they could survive if you were buried alive.
How to survive if you're buried alive. Conserve your air supply. I don't know how you're supposed to do that, but if you are buried in a typical coffin, you will have enough air to survive for an hour or two at most. Take deep breaths, then hold for as long as possible before exhaling. Do not breathe and then swallow, which will lead to hyperventilation. Do not light a match or lighter. Combustion will quickly use your available oxygen. It is safe to use a flashlight if you have one. Yeah, that's right, because they're going to bury you with a flashlight in case you wake up dead.
I know, right?
No? Okay, anyway.
They're going to bury you with a flashlight.
It's okay to use a flashlight if you have one. Do not yell. Yelling will lead to panic, which will increase your heart rate and lead to fast breathing that will rapidly consume your air supply. Okay, now, they're telling you how to survive if you're buried alive.
Exactly.
Now, a little bit of this stuff I can kind of make some sense of, but a couple of things here I just don't freaking understand. Number one, why are they going to bury a damn flashlight with you if they think you're dead? Number two, if you don't yell, how the hell is anybody going to hear if anybody might be close enough that could hear that you're still alive down there? So you're supposed
And don't
to lay
breathe
there
or swallow.
quietly, take deep breaths, and hope like hell somebody thinks, I think I buried them alive. Let's dig them up.
All right.
I'm just saying. That don't make sense to me. None of it. Okay, having said that, number 2, press up on the coffin lid with your hands. An inexpensive pine box, chipboard coffin, or a recycled paperboard coffin will have some give to it, so it will be relatively easy to break through. If you feel flex in the coffin lid, continue to step 3. A metal clad or hardwood coffin will be impossible to pierce. In this case, your only hope is to signal for rescue. Really?
Now,
Signal for rescue.
how many
Use a
coffins do you hear people being buried in? I mean, come on.
Use a metal object, ring, belt buckle, coin, flask, pin to signal that you are alive. Tap SOS.
Stuff, right?
The international distress signal on the coffin lid. 3 quick taps, followed by 3 slower taps, followed by 3 quick taps. Continue to repeat the distress call until someone hears you. Now, I'm sorry, people. Some people might be buried with belt buckles and big enough and loud, strong enough to make a noise. But then again, okay, go back to step 1.
Go back to step 1.
Go back to step 1, because they're talking about everything you do is going to use up your oxygen, right?
Yep.
So if you're beating on a dadgum lid, SOS, 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 you're putting yourself in a freaking traumatic state, which is going to use up your oxygen because you're just going to start breathing really fast.
For number 3.
Okay, number 3. Remove your shirt. Oh my God. Cross your arms over your chest and uncross your arms so that your elbows are bent and your hands are at your shoulders. Pull your shirt up and off over your head from the shoulders. Do a partial sit-up as much as you can in the space available. Then pull your shirt over your head and off. Okay. You're going to do a sit-up in a coffin. Or a partial sit-up. You're not. Anyway, what the hell is taking your shirt off in a coffin going to do for you? Okay, tie the bottom of the shirt in a knot. This is, I guess, tells you what it's for. The shirt should have only one large opening at the neck, as does a bag. Number 5. Place your head through the neck hole. The knot should be on the top of your head. The shirt will prevent you from suffocating on loose earth. Okay, like you're going to find any loose earth because you're inside this metal coffin that they just told you couldn't pierce.
You're awesome, Roger.
Okay. Number 6. Now, you guys in the chat and watching everything, keep note of these facts now because you may need them someday. Break through the coffin using your feet by kicking the coffin lid. A cheap coffin may have already split from the weight of the earth above, making your job easier. Break apart the lid with your hands and feet and let the loose dirt rush in. Exactly. That's what you want. You want the dirt to rush in and finish off the job. Okay, number 7. Use your hands to push the dirt toward your feet. There should be some space at the bottom end of the coffin below your feet. As the dirt rushes in, work quickly but calmly to fill the space at your feet. When this space fills up, push dirt to your sides. Breathe slowly and regularly. Like you freaking really are going to do that if you wake up buried in a freaking coffin. Okay, just saying.
All right.
Okay, number 8. Sit up. As you move to a seated position, the loose earth above will move to fill the space you just occupied. As the dirt falls, continue to push it into the coffin until you can stand up. Number 9, stand. Once you are standing, you should be able to push the dirt above you up and out of the grave. When you have cleared all the dirt above you, climb out. I'm glad they told me to climb out because I'd have never thought of that on my own. Be aware, a recently interred coffin will be covered with loose earth that is relatively easy to dig through. Escaping from a coffin interred during a rainstorm will be difficult. The compacted weight of the wet earth will make digging almost impossible. The higher the clay content of the soil, the more difficult your escape will be. Okay, Christina. Tell us all about it.
Imagining how a person succumbs to death when they're buried alive has provided a fonder for depraved imaginations throughout the centuries. Coffins, equipped with little bells for the mistakenly buried to alert the living, rose in popularity, while grave diggers' error has been greatly reduced since then. Basically, buried in a coffin. Okay? You're buried in a coffin. In a life scenario, asphyxiation is most likely to be the cause of death. The trick to slowing down the suffocation process is taking slow and shallow breaths, but that won't be easy once you start to panic. Conserving the air you haven't displaced in your body is a key. Next move is likely no move at all, because there really isn't any escape. Dioxide replaces the last sips of life-bringing oxygen, blackout and coma ensue. Beaten not too long after. If you just plain buried, murderers are in a rush, or maybe they're just cheap. Tossing a body into the grave without a coffin still counts as being buried alive. They're in a pit meant for funeral. Unless all the soil is replaced at once, the victim is unlikely to break any bones as the grave is refilled. What happens is the weight of the dirt will slowly constrict the chest, making it harder to breathe. Now, as things start to go fuzzy, oxygen is in short supply. Nostrils will fill with soil, making breathing the air available between it's impossible.
Articulates.
There we go. Buried in an avalanche. Hypothermia is a serious issue. Few avalanche victims survive past 25 minutes. Brain damage sets in about 10 minutes after snow and the body, so thinking clearly in an avalanche situation is basically impossible. Matter much because as extremities freeze, they become unresponsive. Avalanche and teamwork really are the only way out. It's only a matter of minutes until consciousness slips away. Brain activity soon follows.
Those in the medical profession during these time periods were not as skilled or knowledgeable as they are today, of course. Barbers and surgeons were frequently one of the same, which aided in the misdiagnosis of death. However, yeah, he looks dead. Let's cut his hair. Okay, anyway. However, it should be noted that evidence of misdiagnosis is difficult to document because there were very few details printed on death certificates. A doctor did not need to be present to declare someone deceased. They just needed to be told that someone died, and that's what they attested on the death certificate. The pallbearers' funeral processions were not smooth, frequently banging the coffins on a wall or hitting a pothole and the bodily functions of the corpse can make it appear as if that person had awakened and struggled to get out of the coffin. Although the fear of premature burial reached its height in the 19th century in Europe, it stretches back to ancient times. And I hope I'm pronouncing this right. The grammarian and metaphysician Johannes Duns Scotus died in Cologne in 1308 when the vault his corpse resided in was open. Later, he was found lying outside the coffin.
That's wild, huh?
Yeah. Thomas A. Kempis died. Yeah, what they're going to put you in a coffin, put you in a vault. And you're going to wake up at some point, get out of the coffin, but you can't get out of the vault. So you're still going to die anyway. You're going to just be laying outside.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Thomas A. Kempis died in 1471 and was denied canonization because splinters were found embedded under his nails. Anyone aspiring to be a saint would not fight death if he found himself buried alive. Now, I disagree with that. Because I don't give a dang who you are. You can be St. Patrick or whoever. If you think somebody buried you alive, you're going to fight to get out. I don't care who you are. You know, holier now, whatever you may claim to be. You are going to fight to survive. That's human nature. So, you know, I disagree with that. But anyway, Anne Green was hanged by the neck until dead, or so they thought. In 1650 at Oxford, she was found to be alive after being placed in a coffin for burial. One kindly gentleman attempted to assist her back to the land of the dead by raising his foot and stomping her chest and stomach with such severe force that he only succeeded in completely reviving her. She lived a long life and bore several children. Man, where they get some of these people?
I know, right?
Premature burial did not affect only the poor, but the wealthy and politically important. Emperor Xenon was buried alive, although some historians feel it was a deliberate premature burial spearheaded by his wife. A young priest was in the pulpit one morning when he was seized by giddiness. He soon lost the power of speech and sunk to the floor. Although he could not see, he could hear voices. As they prepared him for burial, it wasn't until a familiar voice spoke to him that he was able to rise. He was in the pulpit the next day, business as usual. Okay. Virginia McDonald was buried in a Brooklyn cemetery in 1850. Her mother was so persistent that she had been buried alive that authorities finally relented and raised her coffin. The lid was open to find that her delicate hands had been badly bitten as she was lying on her side.
Fingers in the first place. If you wake up in a coffin, why am I going to bite my fingers off?
Why what?
If I wake up in a coffin buried alive, why is everyone waking up biting their fingers off?
Okay.
Fingers off.
When you go into a panic, you're not and this is just what I'm thinking, okay? So I can be wrong, but when you go into a panic and you know that you're about to die and you can't get out, there's no escape and everything, you might, kind of lose your mind. You know what I'm saying? You start just, doing things like a person that would bite their nails or something, only a lot worse.
Okay.
But, I mean, that's just the only thing I can figure out that could be a possibility for that. I mean, it's got to be some kind of hysteria thing. When the Les Innocents Cemetery in Paris, France was moved from the center of the city to the suburbs, the number of skeletons found face down convinced the lay people and several doctors that premature burial was very common. Really now. Okay,
Well,
Christina.
there are stories of men, women, and children suspected of being buried alive when their coffins were later opened and their fingers and hands have been chewed, faces distorted in fear, and their bodies not just laying spilled onto the floor, but several feet away, sitting in a corner, huddled in fear. That these people were rare instances. Well, another common factor of premature burial was plaques and epidemics of smallpox and was that chloria?
I'm sorry. I
It's been reported, that's okay, that during the Black Plague, people who were pronounced deceased could be heard crying for help within the heap of dead bodies. Usually these people were left as they were and buried in mass graves. No one had the stomach to dig them out and would only delay work schedules, which were already overwhelming. Beginning in the 1900s, funerals and burials are delayed to ensure that the deceased was in fact deceased. Prior to the 1900s, there were a couple of books that people referred to determined whether or not someone was actually dead. Physician Jacques Benign Winslow, Uncertainty of Signs of Death. Dr. Winslow was what most termed an expert in the field, as he claimed to be placed in a coffin and prepared for burial twice. His thesis was a body can be called a corpse only when signs of putrefaction was obvious. In other words, keep the loved one out of the ground until the stench of decomposing flesh removed all doubt. These were diseases and conditions that gave the appearance of death to even the healthiest of people. Catalepsy, is that what it is? Catalepsy occurred. It is the immobility of the muscles. The body takes on a waxy flexibility and can be molded into bizarre positions. This condition occurs usually whatever hysteria, hypnotism, or schizophrenia without medicine is present. Spells, falling into trances or comas are often misdiagnosed as deceased. A corpse, sentient? Well, a corpse is someone who is aware of their surroundings but can do nothing to alert people on what is going on. This is an interesting phenomenon and has been known to occur during autopsies. Basically, they're alive. They know you're alive. You know you're alive, but you're just laying there and you can't tell them you're alive because they think you're dead.
Yeah, it's a
you can see them. That's crazy. That's nuts.
There's a lot of crazy stuff that it has to do with this stuff, and I never would have thought about it, till you go digging into it, and it's like, dang.
I know, right?
I'm sorry. There have been a number of inventions to confirm the diagnosis of death. There was a society of men and women called Society for the Prevention of People Being Buried Alive. These people encouraged the slow process of burial. Duke Wellington died in 1928, but was not buried for over 2 months. Crowbars and shovels were buried with the loved ones so they could dig themselves out of the grave. I'm not sure how they were to maneuver the tools right. I mean, you ain't gonna have no room to be. And what are you going to dig with a shovel inside that coffin, right? The wealthy had more options, of course. Some chose special capsules that would be penetrated by nails as the lid of the coffin was lowered and sealed, releasing a deadly poisonous gas. Others chose to purchase Bateson's belfry, which was an iron bell mounted on the lid of the coffin just above the head. The bell could be easily rung with a pull cord inside the coffin. The smallest tremor would set the bell ringing, There is no record of anyone using this device successfully. There were other devices used over time, a telephone loudspeaker security system that could be operated from inside the vaults, and people even left behind food and water just in case. Death is a touchy subject for many people without the added fear of premature burial or being sentient during an autopsy. No one wants to awaken in a crypt or on a table with their body flayed open for the world to see. However, that does not happen. Although pronounced dead by 3 doctors in almost 2 hours in a noose, a young man was found to have a heartbeat. Doctors present opened his chest and found the heart was indeed beating with force.
Wow.
After 5 hours and his chest still open to prodding fingers, his heart finally quit beating and he died. Not only did people have to fear being misdiagnosed, but they had to fear the grave robbers, resurrectionists, and opportunists who saw a profit. Once a corpse had been identified for burial, God help the person, because if they were not dead at the time of burial, in most cases they were murdered. And that's all we have for you, but I hope everybody enjoyed this. This was some really freaky, crazy stuff. And like I said, there's lots of things I never would have thought of involving, being buried alive or nearly being buried alive or surviving being buried alive or, all the contraptions they came up with to let people know they were buried alive. Having said all that,
they should have done dead versus spending all that time the alive part, like they should have done now.
And of course, there was some stuff that we didn't really talk about, like there were cases where people voluntarily were buried alive. We talked about that a little bit, but there were also cases where a family would have one of their family members buried alive to save family honor. And of course, there were the cases where being buried alive was the actual punishment for the crime.
Yeah, like an execution.
Yeah, execution style. But, how could your own family bury one of their family members alive just because their family honor was at stake? That's a little bit, I don't know. Anyway, we hope y'all enjoyed the show tonight. Sorry about the technical difficulties. There's nothing until the 14th. Yeah, okay. On the 14th, we'll be back, and I hope that we have, if we can find it. I'm finding it hard to get information, but I was really wanting to do something on the known and unknown creepy clowns. Okay.
Okay.
There's a lot of them that we know about, like uh, Casey, Pogo the Clown. But there's also, I'm sure, plenty of them out there that didn't have like a big notoriety, that were probably just as creepy. And then, of course, you have the ones from the movies and TV shows. Now, I love the one from the series where they did the one with the carnival creeps. You know what I'm talking about? American Horror Story. They did the one part of it about the carnival freaks, and they had the one clown guy, and that dude was really creepy. I like him. They went out of their way when they created his character, his costume. Anyway, having said that, we appreciate everybody. Sorry again about our little problems. Hopefully next time we'll have everything in better order. Thanks everybody in chat over there. Bill, Tom, Mary, Margaret, everybody else over there that I can't see right now, Divergent. That's not chat. We appreciate you. And we will see y'all on the 14th. I have to get that here. Good night, everybody.